Are you looking to get more smoke flavor out of your Ninja FlexFlame? A lot of YouTubers, including myself, made a mistake when doing their low and slow cooks in a lot of the demos that they were doing. They said that they came out tasting like pot roast, and I said the smoke flavor was pretty light, but I found the solution. Let's look at the anatomy of the Ninja FlexFlame. Now, the natural place to put your meat when you're grilling or cooking low and slow is going to be right here on the center of the main grates. But the vent that has the smoke coming out of it is a little bit higher up and off to the side, and the vent that the heat exits is quite a bit above the main grilling surface. And yes, they do have the cyclonic heat IQ fan, which will circulate the air inside of it, but it's still a question in my mind of how much of that smoke ends up on the main grilling surface. But then it hit me. Ninja sells the expandable smoke and roast rack, which is specifically designed to be able to get more space up here on the upper rack. But why would they call it the smoke rack if that wasn't the way it was intended to be used? When I smoked some ribs and put them on the top rack, they came out smokier than what was on the grilling surface. So I wanted to do a side-by-side test to see if you get more smoke flavor up on the upper rack than you do on the grilling surface. And I could just put one chuck roast up on the upper rack and one chuck roast down on the main grilling surface, but I wanted to test one more option, and that is cold smoking. One of the cool things about the wood fire technology in the Ninja FlexFlame is that you can run it at any temperature, whether or not the burners are on. And I tested that by cold smoking some cheese, and I thought we could do the same thing with a chuck roast to see how it turns out. A lot of people, as they're doing their smoking, are starting the temperatures really low and then building it up over time, and we can recreate that on the Ninja FlexFlame. So I started with one chuck roast on the upper rack, and I cold smoked it for about 45 minutes, so that way it could absorb all that smoke flavor before adding the other two chuck roasts. And I should explain here that cold smoking keeps the meat in the danger zone, which is between 40 degrees Fahrenheit and 140 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's where bacteria and other bad things can grow faster in your food. One round of cold smoking is basically the equivalent of letting your meat set out to come up to temperature just a little bit while you're prepping your grill, and shouldn't be too big of a deal, but I wouldn't go beyond one cold smoke session. And that said, if I had someone who was young, old, or immunocompromised, I would probably skip this step just to be on the safe side. And once that cold smoking session was done on the first chuck roast, I turned on the propane part of the grill and set it for 225 degrees Fahrenheit. Then I put one chuck roast on the grilling surface and a second chuck roast up on the top rack, right next to the one that had been cold smoked. And one of the things I noticed is that the cold smoked chuck roast had already picked up quite a bit of smoke and had gotten a darker color than the ones that had just come out of the fridge. With that going, I filled up the pellet hopper and ran it 2 times. So that gave me about an hour and a half to 2 hours of smoke on all of the chuck roasts. And after that, I cooked them about the way that I normally would. I brought the heat up to more like 275 degrees, later wrapped them in aluminum foil and took them off when they reached somewhere around 203 or 205 degrees Fahrenheit, basically once they became probe tender. And that's going to give me a 3-way test to compare the cold smoke on the top rack, cooking on the top rack, and cooking on the main grilling surface. Did it end up making a difference? And which one is going to come out on top? The cold smoke chuck roast was darker in the beginning and continually throughout the cook than the other chuck roasts were. Once I cut them open, none of the chuck roasts had a really strong, defined red smoke ring. And they all looked really great from the outside, but there was no smoke ring on the inside. Smoke rings are not one of the things that you look for in professional or competitive barbecue, but it generally is an indication that something had been smoked over real wood. So it is something that people look for, especially in backyard cooks. Now, I tasted all 3 of them, and the one that was on the grill grate had one distinct advantage, and that was, even though it was the same weight, it was a little bit thinner, which means it had more surface area, and that means more rub as well. Because it was closer to the fire, it had a little bit more of a grilled taste, not necessarily one that came out smoky, but it was still our second favorite. When I tasted the chuck roasts that were up on the top rack, the one that was not cold smoke had a little bit more smoke flavor, but it didn't compare at all to the one that had been cold smoked, which had quite a bit more smoke. You can definitely tell this had some smoke put on it in the cooking process, which was a significant improvement. Now, I don't want to oversell it. The smoke flavor on the cold smoke chuck roast was definitely stronger, but it wouldn't compare to other live fire cooking methods like charcoal, wood, or using an offset. Some people might prefer that lighter flavor as it is. That said, adding a cold smoke to these low and slow cooks would be my go-to method for any low and slow cooking on the Ninja FlexFlame. And if you're looking for a broader review to see more features that the Ninja FlexFlame has, check out this video.